Welcome everyone to this third edition of the Dialogue on Asian Universities. This series has been organized by a grassroots team of 4 people. Besides myself, there's President Ing-Chai Tang of the National University of Singapore, Dr. Feng Daxuan, former VP of University of Texas at Dallas, and Max Liu of Bloomberg. We are nonprofit and not affiliated with any other organization. Our purpose is to promote a healthy and productive dialogue on timely and important topics facing universities in Asia, and actually by extrapolation to the world. And by panelists who are knowledgeable and experienced on those topics, and not necessarily from Asia, the topics on Asian universities. I hear some echo, maybe Jaeho, you can mute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Until we get to the. Okay, thank you. So the first of this dialogue series, we just call it DAO 1, was on the topic of between East and West, models of Asian upstart university, with panelists from NUS in Singapore and KAUST in Saudi Arabia. It was held in October 2020, last year. The second edition, DAO 2, was on ideas to impact roles of higher education in startup regions, with panelists from Technion in Israel and Sustec in Shenzhen, China. And that was held in January 2021. Now, the topic today is on the role of private universities in Asia. And I would like to start off this dialogue with some of my own thoughts on the topic. And frankly, I can do no better than repeat somewhat what is already in the poster of this dialogue. So please allow me. Now, among the best universities in the world, private universities play a central and leading role. Institutions such as Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, and Yale are exemplary examples of higher education for centuries, and they're all private. In contrast, while Asian universities have witnessed tremendous growth in recent decades, the leading players, by and large, are still public universities. According to QS, the ranking agency, Asian universities account for 45 of the top 200 universities. But among them, among the 45, only less than 10 are private. So the question is, will Asia ever have its own Harvard or Princeton? Or is this even the right question to ask? Now, one may naturally ask, what distinguishes private university from public ones? And what might make them successful? Now, in my view, the success of private university benefits from some unique advantages. First, since private universities are not operated by the government, they usually have more autonomy than public universities. Second, with the autonomy, private universities can afford to pursue their educational visions and philosophies. And as a result, finally, they have also shown greater flexibility to adapt to the changing environment. However, private universities also face major challenges. For example, they generally receive fewer financial subsidies from the government and are more dependent on other forms of support, such as donations, to pursue their ambitious academic agenda. But I should pause here. You know, the distinction between public and private is not so clear. You will hear in the 2 opening remarks from our 2 distinguished panelists, you will see in my own, the joke in my own institution, I was before in University of California, which is a public institution. And the joke among the administrator in University of California is that we are public, not because we are publicly funded. We only receive about 10%, something like that from the government. We are publicly controlled university. So I think you see this theme will repeat in the opening remarks from our 2 panelists. Now, there are also differences between private universities in Asia as compared to the counterparts in the West. While prominent private universities in Western society have established paradigms to maintain independent operations while being financially sustainable, the situation is less evident in Asia. Politically, many Asian countries have governments who believe university management should be part of their mandate. And financially, private universities lack the social support, for example, donations, that their Western counterparts have. As Asia continues to rise globally with rapidly growing economies, what will private universities' future look like in the region? What changes can we expect to see regarding its governance and financing? Most importantly, what roles will they play and what responsibility do they have in solving the global challenges we face? If one looks at Asia and see which countries have the most prominent private university, one would quickly bring the spotlight on Japan and Korea. In each of the two countries, there's a long tradition of elite private universities which excel in scholarly work and producing graduates who become leaders in society. In fact, I have found, somewhat to my own surprise in organizing this DAO 3, that there are more private universities in both Japan and Korea than public ones, in fact, by a big margin, and you'll hear the details later. This is probably not common in Asia, I have to say. So today, we're very honored to have Professor Atsushi Seike and Professor Jaeho Yeom, two exceptional private university leaders in Japan and Korea, respectively, to join us as panelists. I've known both of them for a long time. Professor Seike is currently the president of the Promotion and Mutual Aid Corporation for Private Schools of Japan, so very relevant organization for the topic today. And he is also the immediate past president of Keio University, which is a top private university in Japan. He received his PhD in labor economics from Keio University. Professor Yeom is currently the chairman of the board of SK Holdings, the third largest conglomerate in South Korea after Samsung and Hyundai. And he is also the immediate past president of Korea University, which was the #1 private university in Asia, according to QS. He received his PhD in political science from Stanford University. I hope you agree with me that we cannot find two more qualified panelists for the topic at hand. A little bit about the format of today's dialogue. Each panelist will have an opening remark for about 10 minutes each, followed by 15 minutes of discussion among the panelists with me as moderator, and hopefully leaving at least 30 minutes, maybe a little more, from the floor. Now, for those of you who are interested in posting questions, please post your question to the chat room in Zoom, and we will have our co-organizer, Max, who will monitor those, and he will communicate with me privately, and I will call out the question. The session will be recorded and posted later for public viewing on YouTube and also the DAO website. All right, so with that out of the way, let me start with President Seike to give your opening remark. Please, Atsushi. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. Can you hear me?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Whereas former president of Keio University, as Tony kindly introduced, which is the Japan's oldest private university, and I'm currently the president of Promotion and Mutual Aid Corporation for Private Schools of Japan, which provides Japanese private universities with the government subsidies. I would like to talk about the meaning of being private. I am a labor economist by training, and from an economist's point of view, learning and carrying out research are basically by nature personal activities, by which I mean they increase your income as investment, and they also satisfy your curiosity as a consumption. So universities that provide people with a platform in which they learn and carry out research are also private undertakings. But of course, needless to say to you, education and research benefit the society as a whole as well. And here, I believe that the important point is that these benefits often comes in the long run or in the, not the specific way, by which I mean, for example, curiosity-driven research today will provide a society with unexpectedly enormous benefit in the future. And people who do not necessarily have specific skills, but learn the academic way of thinking and then obtain ability to think for themselves to respond changing circumstances is indispensable in a time of great change like today. However, the problem is that recently, people or taxpayers become more and more short-sighted, by which I mean that people or taxpayers tend to think that the only things worth spending their money on are for things that will provide immediate utility. I mean, they tend to think that it is unnecessary to give public money to curiosity-driven research for which when they will become useful is unknown, or liberal arts education that may not be effective to nurture work-ready students. In this respect, I believe that the meaning of the existence of private universities is extremely significant. The public universities basically rely on public funding, taxpayers' money. But on the other hand, private universities do not decisively rely on public funding from the government. Though private universities also receive the public aid or subsidies to some extent, because even private universities provide education and research that benefit the society. But the public financial support accounts only for 9% of the total income of private universities in Japan. I mean, less than 10% in Japan. And in Japan, considering independence of private universities, the government provides subsidies to them, not directly, but through the promotion and the mutual aid corporation for private schools of Japan. Private universities provide education and research that benefit our society in the same way as public universities do. But what is more, because each private university has its own unique funding principle, it brings to the society an important public benefit that the public universities are rather harder to bring about. That is the diversification in education and research. In a time of great change like today, in order to maintain sustainability of our society, it becomes more and more important for us to increase diversity in various aspects of society. And in this respect, it is very important for private universities, which have a different educational and research policies based on different founding principles, to bring about diversity in education and research. Although a sort of paradoxical, it can be said that because they are private and not decisively rely on taxpayers' money, private universities can provide the society with long-term benefit of curiosity-based, curiosity-driven research and people who can think for themselves, and also bring about diversity in education and research, which bring about enormous public benefit to society in a time of great change. Well, in Japan, private universities are foundation of higher education. Please share table 1, please. Thank you. As you can see the table, both the number of universities and the number of university students, private universities are accounting for almost 3/4 of the whole in Japan. The changes in numbers of private universities and students since 1960 are closely linked to the increasing college enrollment rate in Japan. It is clear, very clear that the post-war expansion of higher education opportunities in Japan would not have been possible without private universities in Japan. The graduates of these private universities are making a great contribution to the society, for example. Please share table 2, please. Yes, which is the ranking of CEOs in the top 10 universities in Japan. As you can see the table, out of these top 10 universities, 6 are private, including first-ranked Keio University. And in addition, the percentage is also high among professionals such as medical doctors, lawyers, and certified public accountants, and so on. Since private universities bring great benefits to the society, there is a rationale for the public to provide financial aid or subsidies to private universities. Please share table 3, please. As seen in the table, they are receiving some subsidies. But of course, as I repeatedly told you, private universities should maintain long-term perspectives in education and research and demonstrate diversity in education and research, which is their unique contribution to the society. And in order to make it possible, they do not decisively rely on financial support from the government. The point is to maintain the right balance, adequate balance between receiving the public aid, public subsidy, and keeping the autonomy. And as seen in the table, broadly speaking, there are 2 types of subsidies. One is a general subsidies that is provided based on the numbers of student and faculty members, which is a neutral to the content of education and research of each university. And another is the special subsidies that are provided based on the programs of government policies at the time. So if private universities become financially more dependent on special subsidies, they will eventually be guided by government policies at each time. So in order to minimize these possible negative effects, subsidies from the government should be in the form of non-specific but general subsidies as much as possible, I think. Thus, the social meaning of the existence of private universities that have unique policies on education and research is enormous. And it is nothing more than the way in which their founding principles are implemented to today. In the case of Keio University, for example, the founder, Yukichi Fukuzawa, established the university to nurture independent individuals who are capable of living their lives without relying on the government or other public bodies. In order to be independent, learning is indispensable, and Fukuzawa believed that obtaining scientific way of thinking would be extremely important. And with this scientific way of thinking as a foundation, he said that the most important thing that people need to develop is the public knowledge as defined in the ability to evaluate people and events, to give greater and greater things priority, and to judge their proper times and places. These founding principles of Fukuzawa are still of importance today, because in a time of great changes like today, success of our lives can only be attained by improving our ability to think for ourselves and polishing our public knowledge such that we can determine what is important at any given moment in time. For private universities, so founding principles are very essential. A society can only be sustainable with financially sustainable independent private universities with unique founding principles, which was, very important point we private university community must always remember. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Atsushi. Very thought-provoking based on your long experience with KO and beyond. Let me move to Jaeho. Please, Jaeho, the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Tony. And I'm very much pleased and privileged to be invited at this webinar. And I'm very happy to introduce Korean cases and also the Korea universities case, the role of private universities in Asia. Okay, next page. As you see that 2020, the statistics shows that out of the 429 Korean universities and colleges, 86%, the numbers of 371 is private. National universities is 50, and public, it means that the local government or something like that, only 8. And among the four-year universities, 81% is private, and national universities 17. It is very unique compared to other European and other Asian countries. Yeah, next please. And as you see that the student enrollment is very similar, and the 77% goes to the private university. So it, naturally leads to the statistics of the budget source of higher education. And OECD average is public is 68% and private is 29%. But in Korea, 38% comes from government, but 62% from private. And the USA is similar, and Japan is very similar. The reason is, you can see that the United States, it is based on the Constitution, and education is some kind of a natural, just a right. And if they want to get some better education by way of paying some money from their own pockets, and it is okay. So the private university is very popular in the United States. But in Korea and Japan, especially on the verge of the modernization process, for example, the late 19th century or early 20th century, the benefactors or the philanthropists, they just donate the money and found the private university instead of the government, because the government didn't have money at that time. So it is very unique compared to European or just other Asian universities. Okay, next please. At the moment, more than 70% of the high school graduates seek admission to universities. It is the highest number in the world. The world average is around 30%. But in Korea, 1960s, only 6% goes to colleges or universities. And at my age, just around the late 1970s and 80s, only 20% went to universities. But as you can see that the Sky University alumni network or something like that, it is a very symbolic guiding post. For example, Seoul National, Korea University, and Yonsei University, top 3 university, and the Korean Yonsei is private. And they just takes the lion's share of the senior government officers, for example, almost 50%, and the National Assembly members, 36%, and the top Korean company CEOs, 62%. It means that the parents see that if they send their children to the top universities, then they can be successful. So it is just like a symbolic guiding post for Korean parents, and the very high motivation of the higher education in 1970s and 80s. Now, almost 70% of the students go to colleges and universities. Next, please. The Korea University we established in 1905, and 5 years before the Japanese colonization. It means that we are the first private university except the missionary schools, just like Yonsei University. The motto, the starting philosophy, founding philosophy is education saves the nation. It means that just in front of the Japanese colonization, very rich person, benefactor, he donated the money and started that kind of things. So we have a very strong alumni pride and support. And it is a very joking thing that we in Korea, we have three mafia groups in society. And one of them is one part of the southern part of the Korean peninsula. That is, that is their hometown. And another is the Veterans Association of Marine Corps. And the third one is the Korea University Alumni Association. It is very strong. And so the entering year of the class is more important than their birth year. And the strong relationship between juniors and seniors. Almost 10% of alumni are active donors. And around the 400 million, just the US dollars, 400 million US dollars are on the average per year donation for private universities. Out of that, my university, Korea University, takes the 10% on the average. So it is a very high number. Okay, next, please. Korea University alone, we just takes the 13% of CEOs of Korean listed companies. In Korean conglomerate, as Tony mentioned, that number 2 is Hyundai and number 3 is SK Group. And both of two groups chairman, the young chairman, Chang Il-sun and Choi Tae-won, they are the graduate of my university. And also the 27% of the board members in Korean media organizations and 15% of the National Assembly members, 7% of the Korean government higher officers are from Korea University. For example, the president of Korea, Myung-bak Lee, is also a graduate, and a mayor of Seoul Metropolitan City recently re-elected. He's Oh Se-won, he's a law school, and the Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun, he's also the College of Law graduate. Next, please. Private university in Korea, and many, when I just participated in the German Chancellor and Presidents Association several years ago, they just asked me if it is a private, is a profit university or something like that, but it is it is surely non-profit university. We don't seek for any profit at all. But so in this sense, government regards private university in Korea as public institution, and we are treated as just like a national university or public university, just like that. We are under the same control and legal regulation. No support but strong regulation. It is too strong, saying. But anyway, tight control of the student enrollment number. We cannot change any one student number in the entering just the examination. And also, they tightly control the entrance examination. Even last year, President Moon mentioned that the top university in Seoul, they should take 40% of the students in the examination, entrance examination, should be taken based on the in Korean SAT score or something like that. It is tightly controlled. And also the control of tuition, and for the last 13 years, the government tightly controlled no increase of tuition. It is, we couldn't have increased any tuition level. And also the board of directors, president of private universities are tightly controlled by the government. And for example, if the board of directors select the president, then we can just receive the some kind of just an allowance from the Ministry of Education or something like that. It is tightly controlled. And regular auditing and monitoring, and but government contributions only less than 5% of university budget for Korea University. But in most cases, based on the competition among, as Atsushi mentioned, that in Japan, they just pay some kind of money from the government based on the student numbers, just like a general budget or something like that. But we don't have that kind of things. Only the project-based competition among the private universities. Okay, next, please. So we just received persuade the big companies and the owners and CEOs. And for example, we received a lot of, especially for buildings or something like that, the donation, for example, LG and POSCO, and some, the Jong-gu Park is a alumni association chairman, and he just donated money. Next, please. Next slide. And the Samsung donate the money for our centennial forward, yeah, $40 million. And the Hyundai Motor Company, the present chairman Chung Il-sung's father, he was a former president. He just donated the money, $70 million for the Hyundai Motor Hall. Next. And this CJ is another very strong, just conglomerate, and he donated more than 20 million. Next, please. And the Dongwon Group, next. And there's some, just like not big companies, but small and medium companies, they just also donate some money. Yeah, next, please. And the Hana, just the financial group, they donated almost $40 million in various buildings. Next. And Chairman Che, and he recently donated almost total $60 million for SK Future Hall. It is a very unique building, and it doesn't have any classroom, and only the discussion room and for the future education. And Kwon Oh-sok is LMP Cosmetic. He donated $12 million. Okay, and another one is the individual donations. Next, please. It comes from the benefactors, and this is a very good sources of our finance. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Jaeho. You are in an enviable position, Korea University, having so many generous donors. I will come back to in a panel discussion to ask you about that. I think there's still some echoes. Okay, we just have to bear. We need to hear from you, Jaeho, so don't turn off because we cannot hear you otherwise. All right, so I think we are more or less on time. So we should have at least 30 to 35 minutes. No, we should have, 30 minutes or so for our, 15 minutes or so for our own discussion. And then we'll then go to the floor. We should have at least 30 minutes for the floor. Okay, so maybe I will start. Okay, maybe I will start with Atsushi. Okay, but Jaeho, feel free to jump in. When you see it. So, in my introduction, I outlined several characterization of the advantages and disadvantages of private university versus public one. For example, autonomy. There was one issue. Vision and philosophy. Flexibility or adapting to change, at least those three general directions. And Atsushi, in your remarks, you actually have directly or indirectly addressed some of them. Okay. By the way, I should say that I agree with you 100% about your emphasis on the importance of basic blue sky research. I think that's what you said, and because of long-term benefit to society. And also the benefit of diversification. I think that actually the second part is not many people appreciate that part. The university should not be all cut off from the same cookie cutter. We all should be a little bit different. We have different roles, different strengths, and so on. But anyway, so of the characterization that I mentioned, do you agree with them? Do you want to take the chance and expand on what you said before, please? Jaeho, maybe you should mute until I talk to you. Maybe that's otherwise. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, indeed. Of course, I completely agree with you. And as I said, if I'm allowed to repeat again, the autonomy and setting its own vision on education and research provide your society with enormous benefit of long-term perspectives and diversification of education and research. But the problem is that, the advantage and disadvantage of private universities are sort of, heads and the tails of coin. Which I mean, in order to maintain your autonomy, you should not decisively rely on public money. But on the other hand, it means your financial base is not so solid, and you always have to worry about fundraising. And that is what both myself and maybe Jaeho had been doing during our presidency.
Yeah. So Jaeho, you want to comment on this aspect too?
Yeah, not much. I totally agree with you and Atsushi, and it is a difficult position, and also the government controlled, as I said before, tuition level, and our total budget on the tuition takes the 1/4 of the total budget, so it is very small. And among them, most of the just the budget goes to as a scholarship to the students, so it is not that much. But so we have to develop a lot of things of the donations, but more and more it is difficult because the CEO or the owner of the conglomerates, they are in the global standard, they cannot spend their money from the companies, and they can spend only from their own personal just a budget. So it is very difficult to just receive the donation, and the fundraising is very difficult. So we have to just make some kind of rationale and why they just donate the money to my company, to my university. So we just raise, educate the good students, and we provide good talented students to the companies. Probably that is the major reason they donate the money.
Okay, I'll come back to the donation issue a little bit later, because I want to ask Atsushi too. But I raised in particular the issue of autonomy, because to a lot of people, it's the essence of a university. Now, it means different things to different people, right? Academic autonomy is you can pursue your scholarly work, according to the internal dynamics of the field. But to the extent that universities are public institutions, as Atsushi you also articulated, right? We provide long-term benefit to society. So there's so how the government probably feels they have the right, they have the responsibility to give some direction to university in general. Okay, so that's one aspect of autonomy, right? Okay, but there's another one, which is financial autonomy, right? Which you both touch on. Now, in a way, you both mentioned that for private university in Japan and Korea, you rely very little on the government. But still, I assume for research money, you probably, I don't know how it works in Japan and Korea. I'm more familiar with in the US. In the US, right, even the Harvards and the Stanford, Princeton of the world, they have to go to the federal government to get research funding, because those are large amounts. So in a way, the privates are not completely private, right? So, okay, so let's say the government, the nation feels that there's a need to develop something. Let's say in technology, in whatever it is. And would they come to the university and say, hey, you have a responsibility, Korea, we want to go into 6G. You have to do more 6G, okay, or whatever, things like this. Do you want to comment on these two aspects of autonomy? Okay, there are two aspects of autonomy. Okay. Who want to go first? Jaeho, you're shaking, you're nodding your head strongly, so maybe you should go first. Okay, you should go first.
Independence or autonomy of research is provided in Korea, because it is some kind of academic freedom. So the government cannot control that kind of things. But by way of research funding, as you said, and out of the 1.2 billion US dollars of Korea university budget, almost half is the R&D fund, and but most of them comes from the government subsidy, government fund, the R&D fund. But I don't think that most of them are the science and technology R&D funds, so it is not tightly controlled by the government as they just make some kind of regulations or some kind of guidance or something like that. But as you mentioned that, for example, 6G or some kind of bioscience, and the government is spatially focused on certain area, surely they have some money. So the professors run into and just to take the money.
They use the carrot. They use the carrot approach rather than the stick approach.
Right.
Okay.
So you know that in Korea, we are number one in terms of the R&D proportion per GDP in the world. Of 4.3% go out of the
that's
GDP
right. I knew that.
Just out of GDP goes to R&D, and the total amount we are number 5th. We just surpassed the UK. So the government has huge amount of money, providing carrot, just to follow the government, just like a industrial policy or something. We are just moving in that way. So the university professors moving that way. So it is a very serious problem for president, in a sense, because we just achieve very high level research outcome, but the very poor undergraduate education, especially science technology. They only educate students just hiring as just the RAs for their graduate programs. So it is a very serious problem, not a general education. So it is pro and cons. Yeah.
Well, very good. Atsushi, why don't you jump in? Please.
As far as research fund is concerned, I think the situation is pretty same in Japan, and of course there are two types of research: applied research and basic research. And as far as applied research is concerned, in each time government wants to provide money for a certain area, like 5G technologies or some vaccination development and so on, and it's okay. But what is problem is what I would like to emphasize is as far as basic research or curiosity-driven research, which may be producing an enormous benefit to the society in the future, no one knows what research would be the adequate one for you to provide the money. So my concern was that to some extent the recent trend or phenomena is people or the government in a democratic country tend to be short-sighted, and they sort of seek very instantaneous result or very quick result from that research investment. So of course I understand there are certain kind of research that would produce immediate or instant result, but on the other hand you should not underestimate the basic research that may not produce immediate utility. And in that respect, I think private universities have an advantage because it's not crucially depend on the taxpayers' money. That is what I mean. Did I make myself clear too?
Very clear actually. Now I want to come back to the other source of financial support, right, for private university, which is donations, private money. Now, Jaeho has devoted a good part of his remarks about that. You're obviously very successful, okay? Maybe you can say a little bit more about, and I want to come back to you, Atsushi, where you should start thinking, but I asked Jaeho first. So what's the secret of success? In other words, okay, well, before you answer, do these donors, many of them are CEOs and founders of large companies, right? I think that you mentioned first, do they donate in the corporate capacity or do they donate in terms of the private, capacity? Maybe the difference is not that big, okay? Because in the US, at least I'm familiar, I think the majority are really from private. The individual make the money from the corporate, from the business, but they donate in the private. I mean, the business also do it. So what is your experience? And in a way, as president, how do you do this? How much time and effort do you spend in doing fundraising, for example? Tell us a little bit about your secret.
Traditionally, the Korean companies, big companies, they just founder, I mean, owners control the businesses. So they donate the money just for justification. As I said before, we are recruiting good, high quality students from that university. We donate the money. We just build some kind of nice building. That is the reason. But more and more, foreign investors and the foreign fund, they just strongly argue that why do you just donate the money in some particular university? So the owners, that at the Samsung problem at the moment, the vice chairman just in jail. The reason is he donate the money. Simply they donate the money, but it is a serious problem. So now, Board of Trustees, the Board of Directors, we have to decide up to certain levels of the donation.
I see.
So the owners, they just escape from that kind of risk taking. So now it is more and more difficult to receive the donation as a corporate money. So
but I want to ask you, Jill, I want to ask you. So I can imagine there's different reasons for people to donate. One is alumni. They love the university, they had a great time and so on. Second, as you said, corporations like to invest in their future. They want to hire future people, right, into their corporation. But maybe there's some who really believes in the vision and philosophy, as Atsushi articulated, of the university. They want to leave a legacy. Right. They want to say this is what. So you see all three kinds.
Right.
Yeah, all three kinds.
Yeah, all three kinds. Right. Yeah, all together. And also, I just add one more thing. So in my time, I just changed my just a strategy, and we cannot receive the donation from the company directly. So I just make a R&D fund. So the company needs some kind of technology, and they donate the money to the university. Then they just R&D fund. They just receive tax benefit.
I see.
So they donate the money, and then the university just distribute that money to a certain research topic, and we just ask the professors involved in that.
But do you have to deliver? Do you have to deliver specific result? Is it like a sponsor research, or is it really?
Right.
It's like
right. Yeah, right. And we also, we do. And I just make it, and we just make our color is crimson, and we just make 100 top crimson enterprise, and just we receive the R&D fund, and the 30% goes to the overhead to the university, and the 70% the research fund, and then they just make a development of certain technology. And in addition to that, and I just make persuade the professors, please do these kind of things, and then it is very good for the tax benefit for the companies and the research outcomes, and it is good.
So it's a win-win-win situation. How does it work, Atsushi, in KAUST?
Well, this is also the case in Japan. Alumni donation is very important. First of all, the composition of income of Japanese private universities in average, roughly speaking, about more than 50% of income is from the student tuition, maybe 30% from economic activities, including a financial benefit, investment return, and 10% from other income, including donations, and less than 10% from government subsidies, as I told you. And it is difficult to raise tuitions anymore, and we should not rely too much on the government subsidies, as I told you. So we have to increase financial revenue. And as educational, on the other hand, institutions, we cannot take a high risk, high return kind of investment policy. So we need to obtain necessary financial revenues for, scholarships, as Jaeho said, without taking a high risk. That is possible only by adding fund, size of fund itself from donation. And in this respect, like Korea University, Keio is fortunate enough to have very loyal alumni as donators. And I always believe that, you know, the best indicator of the success of your education is to what extent your alumni, you know, donate to you. And also, I particularly appreciate the donation from our alumni because it is not only just, you know, money flow, but also a sort of, you know, mind flow from the alumni to the current student. I mean, you know, encouragement from alumni to the current student. And as far as donations from the company is concerned, I think the situation is a little bit changing. I mean, in the past, frankly speaking, you know, governance regulations of the Japanese corporation was not so rigid like today. So, for example, you know, if CEO was alumnus of Keio University, he or she just decided to donate some big amount of money from the company to the Keio or something like that. But now, you know, the governance of the company became much rigid. So, you know, CEO, I mean, who graduated from Keio, have to, you know, explain or have to be accountable for the, you know, stakeholders, I mean, the stockholders, you know, to what extent the company can get the benefit by donating that money to Keio and something like that. So it is much difficult for the, you know, CEOs not himself or herself own the company, donate the company money to the Keio. Of course, you know, if he or she completely own the company, maybe, you know, he or she can freely donate the company money to the university.
There's a majority owner. Yeah.
But the situation, I mean, the situation is getting a little bit difficult for the university to obtain the money from the private businesses. Yeah.
Well, okay. Let me move to my next point. You know, I still have maybe 5 minutes, but before we open up the floor, very quickly, you know, this is you know, we are a dialogue on Asian university, but we are the Asia is really more like upstart, right? Even though your university is like over 100 years old, you know, Oxford is almost 1,000 years old. So, Jaeho, why don't I ask you, okay? Because you are now in Asia, but you went to Stanford, you know, which is one of the, you know, Western prominent university. How would you compare the two systems? I mentioned this in my opening remarks, okay? So do you see, let's not talk about donation and fundraising anymore, but the role of the private university in the ecosystem, not just Stanford, of course, is very much Silicon Valley and all that, but even beyond, you know, maybe they also place many people to, you know, government and other places. But what's your own personal view about, you know, East and West in terms of private university and the roles?
Yeah, as I said before, the Korean university started in 1905, just before the Japanese colonization. So it means that it is a national pride, especially in the countryside. They have a very elite students, and they just send students to Korea University from the countryside. So we are very that kind of spirit. And so that's the reason why some individual donors, they don't have any relationship with Korea University. They donate the money to Korea University because of the spirit. And also, yeah, you are just talking about what is the strength of the Korea University. For example, we are the leaders. I mean, the Yonsei University and Korea University, both universities are leading private university. We are the leaders in various fields, and also for we are a little bit just a global oriented mind since 1970s and 80s. So, for example, our total faculty members, out of total faculty members, around 80% are the US PhDs. So we are educated in the United States. So we are just bring the United States just the top of the edge, just the technology and sciences and knowledge to the students. And in that sense, we are very globalized. So just like the students graduate from the top university, they enter the big companies, and they're just the competitors in the global market. So it is some kind of just a cycle of the products in the education and businesses or something like that.
Yeah, if you allow me, I can add some comment here, because I also went to Stanford. My PhD is from Stanford. So I can remember one example where I think this really shows that a private university like Stanford can do something that neither the government, nor publicly funded university can do as well as they do. For example, when the former president of Stanford, John Hennessy, stepped down, he became the leader of a big postgraduate student fellowship program at Stanford, funded by the founder of Nike. You want to know, Phil Knight.
Right.
So it's called the Knight Hennessy. So this is, I forgot how much money, it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And the idea is to fund, people coming in to do their PhDs. And it doesn't matter what they do, it's on top of their normal stipend. And it's for the whole world. It's not just for the US. And I remember John Hennessy came to HAUST to try to recruit people. So something like that, it combines donations, right, from an alumnus, in this case, Phil Knight, to do something for the long term. And it's more difficult for a public university. I mean, it's not impossible, of course, you can still do the same thing, but they can just do it like this. So to me, I think that's a good example. I think that's, okay. So I want to come back to the last of the panel discussion. In the beginning, I want to ask Atsushi this question next. I had mentioned before, as Asia continues to rise globally with a rapidly growing economy, so what will private universities' future look like? You already hinted, the private university has grown tremendously in size and in terms of number of students. So what changes can we expect to see regarding its governance? We talk about financing already, governance, government, you have boards and so on. What role would they play, and what responsibility do they have in solving the global challenge, not just national? So, Atsushi, will you want to comment on that?
Well, I think it is very important for the, university community to contribute not only to solve the problem for a country they exist, but also for the, the global world. And I think one important point is that since private universities are relatively independent from government where it's located, so it is much easier for us to, for example, collaborate with other private universities in foreign countries. For example, in Asia, there are some sort of a political conflict among nations. But, for example, Keio and Waseda, two top private universities in Japan, maintain very close relationships with Yonsei and Korea, also two top private universities in Korea. And we have 4 president meetings every year. And even when we have some sort of a conflict between nations, private universities can maintain collaborations and friendships. Although, we are members of each country but also we are members of a global university community, particularly of a private university community. So I think, private universities, particularly in Asian countries, are able to, there are many more rooms for us to make a collaboration. For example, East Asia are facing the same problem of aging population. People are getting older and older. And in order to cope with such a demographic change, aging population, a common challenge of aging population, I think, for example, these 4 universities in Japan and Korea will be able to collaborate to seek some solutions to cope with that.
Atsushi, a very excellent point about this, the role that universities can play, especially private ones, as a bridge between people, between culture, beyond politics.
Right.
I think that's a very, very intellectual pursuit. That's very important. Now,
Yes.
I want to come to my last question. I want to turn to Jaeho, okay? What advice would you give to governments, educators, or philanthropists in other Asian countries who are either running or contemplating starting private university? What about advice for parents and students in choosing such universities? How do they choose? Anyway, any general advice? But Atsushi, you can also come in at the end, okay? This is my last question for the panel. Jaeho, should they even try?
Yeah, probably. Is it some kind of a social responsibility for wealthy people and in Korea, especially in the modernization process, we are a little bit behind. So they think that education is the most important element, social, just the resources. So they donate the money and just make this kind of donations. It is, well, from my experience in Japan, compared to Japanese society, Korean, just the companies donate more money to the universities compared to Japanese companies to Japanese universities. So for example, the scholarships are very popular, and by myself, the SK Group, when it is a very small medium companies, they just make a global scholarship. So that is the reason I just received the full scholarship that I could go to Stanford University. And also Stanford at that time, around the 50 students, they are just they receive the scholarship from private or government scholarship. But most of the engineering students, especially electrical engineering, they are the PhDs from Stanford. They are now the leaders of the Samsung Electronics. So most of them, the chairman, former chairman, and all of them are the Stanford electrical engineering PhDs. So this kind of sponsorship from the government and also the private sectors, it is some kind of locomotives for the success of the global company in Korea.
But you were saying also it's a social responsibility. You are saying it's a social responsibility.
Yeah, social responsibility.
Okay.
So from now on, some Asian countries will have that kind of just a pattern and lessons from Korea. Yeah.
All
right, Atsushi, you want to add to this? Your thoughts?
Yeah, my reply is rather general. I completely agree with Jaeho as well. And I mean, I hope, for example, governments and taxpayers understand the importance of private universities, not only because numbers of students studying there, but also because, provide private universities that they have more autonomy can play an indispensable role to provide a society with long-term perspectives in education and research, and also to provide diversity in education and research, which is very important for the society, particularly in a time of great change. And I would like parents and students carefully examine the founding principles of each private university and choose the best university of which principle they like best. And I hope all the stakeholders of private universities, particularly alumni, will maintain autonomous and financially independent, sustainable private universities by providing generous financial support as well as moral support.
Well, thank you. If I may add my own advice to this, right? I want to quote a famous Chinese saying. It says, it takes 10 years to raise a tree, but it takes 100 years to raise a human. So I think for those, especially philanthropists, in Asia, there's a lot of wealth. Some of them are concentrated individual or family. And you want to leave a legacy. If you believe in education, there's no better calling to found a university with a certain vision and philosophy, but give them as much autonomy as possible. Okay, trust the presidents.
Excellent conclusion.
Let them do their thing. And you heard all the thing, in 10 years, in 50 years, you see this, not only CEOs, by the way, right, but just pillars of society contributing to society. Okay, so I think we have now, we want to open up to the floor. We're about, according to my clock, at least roughly 25 minutes. I said, I hope 30 minutes. I can stay a little longer, but let's say 25 minutes. And according to Max, there's over 10 questions already posted to the chat room. And Max tried to sort of merge it with, for me. So I would just use my moderator's prerogative, and I would just pick from there. Okay. So one question that has come up related to governance. That is, what about the role of the Board of Trustees of private universities? Because you don't have government looking over your shoulder, but you got to have accountability. So you must have a Board of Trustees, right? How are they composed? What's their role? Especially you in your experience as past president, do they micromanage you, and so on and so forth? Well, so please, maybe Jaeho, start with you, okay? Board of Trustees.
Yeah, Board of Trustees, we have 9 members, and including me, the president, and from the founding family, and also the alumni association, and some, the big companies or something like that. So it is composed of the various different parts. But from my case, I was very lucky because Board of Trustees, they don't control at all, and fully trust president for 4 years, and then just any recommendations or any that kind of things, and simply they support me because they select me as a president. So okay. I had the full authority to control my university. Yeah.
Very good. Atsushi?
Same here. I mean, in case of KAUST, first of all, we have members of councillors. That is almost 100 people. And then these, we have at the Board of Trustees, members of maybe 20. And half of them are from, university side. I mean, president, vice president, and deans, and so on. And the half of other, members are from mostly alumni. And most of them are business leaders and some professionals like, successful lawyers and so on. And as Jaeho said, Board of Trustees sort of has chosen president. So they are basically, supporters of the president during that term. But the interest, one thing I appreciate was, sometimes, these people have a quite different opinion from the point of view of the, the academic community. And we sometimes need, some fresh criticism or opinions from the outside of the, the academic community. And that is an important, I think, role for the particularly, the Board of Trustees from the outside of the academic community.
Okay, Susie, thank you. I should also, to the extent I know, I should mention the names of the people who asked the question. Okay, so I'm getting them. There are at least two people who asked this. One is Lee Sing Lu from Thailand, from Assumption University of Thailand. And the other one is Hamid Sales from King Abdulaziz University. That's actually near KAUST. Hello? Okay. In fact, Hamid asked, actually, maybe I can answer that question. He was asking, what about the roles of the Board of Trustees? Are they different in Asia compared to Western universities? So because I went to Stanford, I know I was at UCLA, so I know a little bit. And so one thing that is maybe, especially private universities, so many of the Board of Trustees of private universities in the US are alumni. I think you mentioned. And their role, and the role are twofold. One is, of course, governance, accountability. They have to hire the president. They have to fire the president if they don't do their job. But second, they're supposed to support the university. They're also the cheerleaders, because through their network, not just money, it's not always money. They need to support. They can also lend political support, right? These days, universities are not separate from politics. So the fact that you have alumni that are in government, it's not that they give you favor. They actually understand what you do and they can help explain the case. I think that really is the benefit. So I think this is a very subtle thing, because if you have a younger university, in Asia, you have more younger universities. And you don't have enough of these established alumni that are out there who understand this aspect. So I would say that's one difference between Asian and Western university. All right, so that's one. Another question that came in is actually, I think we answered already. There are at least two questions to talk about finance. You know, what about the model for funding? This is a Victor Ho from University of Malaya and Dr. Samar Shoaib from University of Business and Technology. I don't know where, but what about, you know, the independence of finance? I think that was mostly covered in the panel discussion. So I would rather devote the question to other topics. Now, there's another question that I thought was pretty interesting. This is from Ryan Choi from University of Hong Kong, okay, where I was for almost a decade. Is private university more risk-taking and hence a better road than public university to promote social change? I think that's a very intriguing question, okay? So I think in Hong Kong probably has a special meaning. Hong Kong in a way is unlike Japan or Korea, I would say. You know, it's a sort of the older, the more established universities are the public universities. There are many private universities, but they are sort of younger. They are not as prominent as a public one. So what role do they play? So maybe who want to go? Atsushi or Jaeho, either one of you?
Well, you know, the one law that, you know, the people expect to university to play is to show some different point of view from, you know, the current government or so on. I mean, or as I told you, public university, which basically depend on taxpayers' money, have to be sort of neutral, or have to seek on the average way of thinking. Okay, but when social structure is drastically changing, it is really it is very dangerous for you to have only one average way of thinking, or only one, you know, sort of idea. It is very important for you to have a different kind of ideas or, you know, opinions, even though it seems to be a bit extreme. So I think university community always have to provide a sort of a different or counter idea to the, you know, the mainstreams in the society, in a sense. So I think in this respect, if I am allowed to repeat what I told again, you know, private universities which have a sort of a different, unique founding principle or a different, unique vision can play an important role.
Jaeho?
Yes. Yeah. Even private university, the university itself is very conservative. I mean, the academics are conservative, and even president cannot control the individual departments. So it is very difficult to take risk for facing the rapidly changing society. But we can have some kind of innovative ideas. We can infuse, you know, certain project or something like that. So, for example, in Korea, even though the government controlled the enrollment student numbers tightly, but there's some kind of leeway. For example, the contract-based department, contract-based major. For example, the company just like the SK, we have a SK Hynix, that is the world #2 DRAM producer, and they just pay the money, and they can organize the some kind of course outlines or the majors or something like that, and then they promise to hire all the graduate. In that case, for example, in most cases, 4 times of the total amount of the student tuition. They just donate the money. Then all the students are the full scholarship received, and then the other 3 times of the tuition goes to the individual professors' incentives or R&D funds or the development of the departments or something like that. So we are very successful. One example is the cybersecurity department. That is number 1 in Korean engineering schools. All Korean, even the KAUST, we are number 1. The reason is they received the full scholarship from the Ministry of Defense, just like a military academy. And then just the professors, just to make some kind of research fund or something like that. And they just paid some amount of money, salary to the students. So it is a top, department in the world.
Let me come in. I'm trying to read between the lines of this question. Okay. And let me be a little bit provocative. Okay. So, so imagine there's some social movement in society, social change, right? There's some demonstration. I mean, this happened certainly in Korea. I pay attention. In Japan, I don't know. I haven't seen that as much, but certainly in Hong Kong, right? In the last decade, there's a lot. So of course, university is not exempt, right? We are people, as young people, students, staff. So what's the role of the university? See, because those are kind of social change, right? It's a movement started from society. So university are part of society. Now, for public university, maybe in terms of autonomy is less. I think that's what the question is about, okay? Because they're funded by the government. If the social change is about changing the government, then they might feel a little bit more restrained. But private university, you're supposed to have more autonomy. So I think that's really the question. So this is a little bit provocative, okay? But during your tenure, let's say as president, have you encountered a situation like this where something going on outside the university, social change, and there's some pressure on the university? Hey, university, you should do this too. Or have you? What's your take? Now that you are no longer president, you should be a little bit more open to say what I want to say.
Of course, as even if we believe that university play an important role in the changing society, but of course, as a university president, I hate to see a student movement in our campus or something like that. But and so, but seriously speaking, I think, for example, I just mentioned about the student movement. When I was a student, even student movement was gradually calmed. My brothers and sisters' generation, there was a very hot student movement in 1960s or early 1970s. It's almost
your older brothers and sisters or younger?
Older brothers and sisters.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a kind of more, radical movement. But now, most of the students are much more interested in, getting good jobs and so on, and not so interested in change of society or something.
Okay. What about in Korea, Jaeho? What about in Korea? We see a Korean student demonstrating all the time. Okay.
Yeah, right. We are very famous, and the Korea University very famous for student demonstration. And for example, 1960. We toppled down the Syngman regime, and the Korea University is the April Revolution, and we were the leader at that time. So, because of this kind of tradition, 1970s and 1980s, all of the student organizations, leaders, they become National Assembly members, and also the ministers or something like that. So they are the leaders in the society, and also early 21st century, some of the professors in the business school, he started some kind of civil organization, just like consumers, right, or something like that, or small stockholders' right movement or something like that. So they just changed the whole system of the society, and then they become later, just like an ambassador or the ministers or something like that.
But you were saying when they were students, they want to change the government, but then later on in life, they become the government.
Yeah, right.
Is that what you're saying?
That kind of
I
path,
see.
that kind of path, it is very common. And two different ways. And the one side is just a regular way. They take the bar exam or the pass the higher civil servant examination, and that is one course. The other course is some kind of student movement, student activities, and they become the leaders and become congressmen later.
Yeah, okay. I think this is an interesting topic. It's a topic on its own, you know. I think the question whether you, because you are private, that you feel more freedom to participate more, right? Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I just want to add, compared to especially 1960s or 70s, compared to national university, private university, just like Korea University, Yonsei University students, that kind of opposition and demonstration much stronger than the national university students. Yeah.
Okay, because you're private. Okay. All right. I have actually another interesting question. There's a set of questions that I summarize like this. Actually, I don't. The names are not identified, but it's about measurement of success of university, in particular private university. So one is actually applies to both. Atsushi and Jaeho. That is, both of you mentioned about number of CEOs among your graduates. So the question is that the only measure of success? I assume that's not, but you might want to expand on that. Okay, you did mention government officials and many things like that. But there might be other measures, right? Maybe you have someone who become a poet, okay, or make good movies, okay, and so on and so forth, whatever, they or become educators, right? So so that's not. The other one is actually very interesting, especially in STEM. Japan in particular, Susie, maybe I'll let you take that, okay? Japan in recent decades is very famous for getting a lot of Nobel laureates, Nobel prizes. Almost every year in Nobel Prize, there's always someone from Japan. I think Japan is almost unique in Asia for that. So is that a good measure of success? And what's the secret in doing that? I mean, this is not just about KO, about Japan in general. So maybe Jaeho, you can answer the first question first about CEOs, beyond CEO, and maybe Susie, you can of course answer about anything, but please, Jaeho. Okay. What's the measure of success?
Yeah. Measure of success, yeah, right. Traditionally, up until recently, we just focus on especially parents just focus on the success in lawyers and congressmen or the higher civil servants or something like that. But in these days, it is changing a little bit. For example, Yonsei University, the Bong Joon-ho, the director last year, he won the Academy Award. It is the first Korean movie director just received the award from the Hollywood Academy. And
I know that movie.
Yeah, the Parasite. Yeah,
Parasite.
He's a Yonsei University graduate. And my university, another director, he's not that much famous, but he just make more than 10 million people just moviegoers for his own movie, and he just makes 3 that kind of movies in Korea. It is something legendary one, and also we have a lot of poets and just novel writers and that kind of thing. And also athletes are very important in Korea. For example, the famous soccer players or because Yonsei and Korea University, we have rival university, we have annual competition and soccer and the baseball. And Yeona Kim, the famous figure skater, is our graduate. Korea University. And the Hwang Young-jo, the marathon Olympic the gold medalist, he's also graduate of my university. So there are a lot of areas that we just we have pride to have that kind of alumni.
Very good, very good. Atsushi, what about the Nobel laureates from Japan?
With a Nobel Prize, but maybe I sort of emphasize too much of a materialistic aspect of the alumni success. And as you know, I'm a labor economist by training. So of course, one most important indicator of the university education is, no doubt that, income grows by, taking the education from a university. But probably one, again, if I am allowed to repeat what I said again, one very important indicator is, the satisfaction of alumni. And one of the sort of very, explicit indicator of their satisfaction is a donation. It's not just the amount of donation, but what percentage of your alumni donate to you, or to frequently your alumni donate to. And so again, maybe I sort of emphasize too much about the monetary or materialistic aspects, but I think, satisfaction of alumni, for example, as showing, the donation rate, would be one most important indicator of the success of your school. And for example, if I am allowed to, talk about a rather sort of, ambiguous maybe explanation, but it is very important for the university to let its alumni, finally think that I am very glad to be graduating from the school. I mean, I'm very happy to be an alumnus of the school when you are dying. So in your last day, if you feel you're very glad to be an alumni or alumnus of the school, that would be the best indicator.
Yeah, thank you. But on the, I won't let you go on the Nobel laureates question, because actually this question is very specific. Do you have some data on how many of them are from private universities? Do you have any idea? Of all the Nobel laureates in Japan in recent years, you have any sense? I mean, of course, you don't have all the data at your hand. Atsushi, do you have any idea? Anyway, if you don't know, you don't know. I mean, yeah.
I have no idea about that right now.
Yeah, because that was what the question was about. Actually, that's an interesting data to know, right? Because it depends on the individual, right? It's just the individual could be in any university, but anyway, I have maybe one or two more questions, maybe given the time. There was one question that actually is interesting to me. It touched on the role of culture, Asian culture in particular. Okay, so certainly, I would say Korea and Japan, you already mentioned, share similar culture. I would say East Asian countries share some culture. Right? It's sort of, the Confucius culture, right? I mean, we all use chopsticks, okay? and so on and so forth. So the question is, what role does culture play in building university? In particular, for private university, what role does culture play in sort of how you convince in fundraising? When you go to a donor, right? Why would a donor donate? That depends. I already hinted at it. I didn't think about it as a cultural background. So are they giving because there's a tax break? I mean, that's a very materialistic view, right? Or maybe they like the school because they are alumni. Of course, this is universal. But maybe they donate because they feel they are a strong part of society. Because supposedly Asian culture is where the society, it plays a bigger role than the individual, right? This is how people usually compare. I think there's some point to that. So maybe Asian want to donate to society through the university. Is that in your experience? Is that correct?
Well, I'm not quite sure it is a culture or not, but traditionally in Japan, particularly from the feudal era, since the 15th century, I think the people put a heavy value on education. In the feudal era, we have maybe more than 300 feudal masters, and these feudal masters sort of established its own school. And even in a town like Tokyo or Osaka, there are merchant sort of established schools, and even the community put money together to establish the school. So I think maybe Asian countries, like I think it is also true for the Korea. People have some tradition to respect education, and for example, people do not always respect the rich, okay? But people usually almost always respect the people who have a good knowledge.
Yeah, scholars. Yeah, okay.
So I think that tradition may have some positive impact on raising a fund for the schools and so on. Yeah.
Is it similar in Korea, Jaeho?
Well, yeah. And traditionally, you just mentioned the rural Asian culture, Confucianism. Yeah, sure. And especially Korea University is very strong in group spirit. And they just consider Korea University as a family member, or junior and seniors, their relationship. And especially professor students relationships are very strong. And in the Chinese old saying, the Confucian idea, the king, teachers, and fathers are same. And it is this kind of a philosophy still exists. So the students are very loyal to their professors. And May 15th is the Teacher's Day, and they just come to me and bring some flowers and a lot of things. So,
Jaeho, go ahead.
Yeah, so it is just like a family, rather than individual people, especially this kind of, compared to national university, private university has their own spirit and the founding philosophy. So it is just infused in a various way. So the students feel that kind of thing. So very, very tight one. So I just mentioned in this way, for example, for the foreign students, when they come to Korea University as an exchange student, I just mentioned that if you are a graduate of Korea University, and then I just said that alumni association approval. The reason is, it is a kind of a better than American Express card. If you lose any credit cards in for example, traveling in Europe, and you just knock the doors of the Korean embassy and find out who is the Korea University graduate, and then he will
they will help you. Very good.
I think what Jaeho said is very important. I mean, even if we are private universities, students are not consumers, right? They are, the members of our family. And,
they're not your customers. They're not your customer. They are customers.
Not customers. Okay. They are, our family members once they enroll into.
Now, I want to quote an example, especially about Korean culture. Okay, because I personal experience. Because I have actually quite a number of Korean students, PhD students, and this is in the U.S., right? So. In the U.S., American student will, after the first day or two, they'll just call you, Tony, okay? But a Korean student always say, Professor Chan. Even they are now professor. They are big professor now, they will say Professor Chan, okay? So this is a respect for teacher. I think it's very, very strong. Okay, so I think that's a personal. So I think we're out of time, but I do want to bring up one last question. So let's be brief, because I also want to comment on this last question. And the question is about globalization. So, could the panel suggest some strategy on overcoming challenges faced by educational institutions in terms of globalization, hiring and retaining the best talent during these, especially during the pandemic time, but more generally? For example, there was another question about what's the percentage of international faculty do you have in your university? Very quickly, we're out of time already. Who want to go first? Yeah.
Well, if you like or not, I think there is no way for you to, avoid a globalization in many fields of our activities. And I don't think, university community is an exception. And
how do you recruit global talent? How do you recruit global talent? Is language or culture a barrier? What's the percentage of global faculty you have?
In order to be globalized, you don't have to make all of your lectures delivered in English, but
that's true. That is true.
We absolutely need to recruit more students from abroad, and we also need to recruit our faculty members from abroad.
For my university, and recruiting foreign faculty members there's some kind of problems not because of the incentives or treatment or that kind of, but because of the social atmosphere. I mean that some residents and the education for their children, it is some kind of limitation, especially language barriers. But my university, we have 10% of just the faculty members are foreign, but some of them are the Korean Americans. I mean, but the globalization, we have the Korea University traditionally is a countryside, sort of a very domestic university. We changed our just the image in the centennial, from the centennial 2005. Since then, at that time, only 11% of the total courses are taught in English, but now 40%. Of the courses are taught in English, so very, very globalized in this. That is the reason we just make a higher ranking of the QS or the Times Higher Education.
Maybe I can end by just giving my own experience and talk a little bit about KAUST from this perspective. By the way, so first thing I want to say is that I actually met one of our PhD alumni, who is from either France or US, I forgot. Okay, he's so he went to Korea and became a professor, young professor in KAUST, for example. So I met him at KAUST actually. So this is really global. I was talking about KAUST. We are very global because we're in Saudi Arabia. We're University of Science and Technology. We're like the KAUST of Saudi Arabia. And there has not been a big tradition of having a University of Science and Technology of this kind, that is global. So our faculty are over 90% international. Our students are maybe 2/3 international, including this one who went to KAUST. Okay, we have students coming from Asia. We have students coming from the rest of the world. We are private in the sense that we are not part of the ministry. We have our own independent board. As you said, our funding come from a substantial endowment. Okay, so we also we're attractive to international scholar because we provide the autonomy and the continuous funding. Because we don't go every year to go to the government and seek funding, so we're a little bit more protected from the political wind. In the US or in Hong Kong where I was, right? Every year you go to the government. If you're a public university, you have to sort of apply for the budget and wait for approval. There's always, and for individual professors, you have to go to the federal government for research support. You are not guaranteed to get it. At KAUST, we have a more different system. So we are hiring people. So those of you who are out there, even during the pandemic, we are still in a growing state. We're not at a steady state. But anyway, enough about KAUST, okay? Anyway, I think we should come to a conclusion, come to a close. I thought today, I think the topic was very interesting to me personally, because Korea and Japan, in a way, you're almost among the few countries that have this role of private universities so prominent. And you two are such experienced people because you led those two private universities, two most prominent universities in your countries, and you're very knowledgeable about the world. So I hope through your presentation, through our discussion, through the answers to the open Q&A session, I hope the audience will get some idea of this perspective of this important topic. Now, I apologize, we cannot get to every question. Okay, but all right. So thank you very much to everybody involved. So I adjourn this webinar.
Thank you very
Please
much.
come
Thank
to
you.
Dow 4. Dow 4 will announce it. Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Atsushi.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good night.
Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.